Very good. Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the August 2nd, 2023 meeting of the Edina City Council. It is 7:02 p.m. As Director Bennerat mentioned, some of you may be watching in another mode other than in the council chambers, participating in this meeting or watching the meeting. You could be watching on cable TV or on Facebook or some other method through our video system. And if you want to call in and participate in the meeting, you're sure welcome to do so. We have an opportunity tonight during community comment to do that. We don't have any public hearings tonight, so there'll be that one opportunity to call in and talk to the council about something that's on your mind. It cannot be on the agenda this evening or scheduled for a future public hearing. We'll talk to folks in the audience first that are fellow residents of ours that want to address the council on matters of concern to them that aren't on the agenda or scheduled for a future public hearing. And then we'll go to the virtual world. There's your dial-in number. This is going to come up fairly fast, so pay attention to this number and the conference PIN number. And then the operator, give her your name and number, give that person your name and number, and they'll bring you into Director Bennerat, who will bring you into the council. So having provided that information, I'm going to call the meeting to order and ask our clerk, Sharon Allison, to do the roll call. Clerk Allison.
Councilmember Agnew.
Here.
Councilmember Jackson.
Here.
Councilmember Pierce.
Here.
Councilmember Risser.
Here.
Mayor Helpman.
Here. Next is Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thanks, everybody. Now we have a form of meeting agenda that's been published and available to both council members and the residents of our community for several days. Is there anyone on the council or staff that wishes to modify the agenda in any form or fashion? Is there a motion to approve the meeting agenda as published?
So moved.
Second.
Got a motion by Member Jackson, second by Member Pierce to approve the meeting agenda as published. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adoption of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. The meeting agenda is approved. And now we are on to community comment. I mentioned this would come up quickly, and we are ready for community comment. So if you're calling in, there's your number, and I'm going to go to the audience first and welcome people to come up and address us. Give us your name and address, and you'll have 3 minutes. You'll get a little yellow warning light when you got about 30 seconds left, and you can think about wrapping up your comments. Good evening. Welcome.
Good evening. Welcome. Thank you. Hello, my name is Kent Kramer. I live at 5713 Parkwood Lane. I've been a resident here for over 24 years. Thank you, Mayor Hovland, council, and staff for allowing us the opportunity to express ourselves in these meetings. I'm increasingly concerned by the apparent lack of attention paid by some on the City Council and HRA to the citizens you represent. The policy of notifying owners within 1,000 feet of a proposed project is inadequate. Change impacts entire neighborhoods, not just the folks having to look at something all day long, but also those that drive on by and wonder what could have been. Imagine citizens with weeks of extra notice to organize, educate, and rally. Now we play catch-up and move quickly and decisively. With the generosity of hundreds of concerned neighbors, we seek counsel, invest our time in securing proof of opposition, blanket the neighborhood with signs, and pass along cards. I have combed through hundreds of pages of documentation, including meeting minutes, workshop minutes, comprehensive plans, Med Council plans, 2040 regional parks plans, zoning maps, population maps, valuation maps, property age maps, and condition maps. I have read minutes and heard comments and recorded audio from council meetings and workshops suggesting to me how naive and uninterested some of you apparently feel your constituency is for the process of government. Like making the variance approval process more streamlined like making the variance approval process more streamlined as you push things through, or holding workshops to train on how to best deal with constituents' opposition to density, scale, and housing-related issues. I have observed far too long how the city rides roughshod over the constituency, approving projects, with apparently majority opposition and disapproving others where only a small minority seems to be present. I feel common sense should be brought back to our vocabulary. I get that the majority may not always be right. Likewise, the minority is not always wrong. You, the City Council, need to make better decisions aligned with your constituency. Just how much pressure must the Parkwood Knolls neighborhood bear upon government to get where they both know they need to go? Profit-motivated, developer-led proposals at the expense of current residents and businesses must come to an end. Our city planners are certainly qualified enough to interpret the code, the comprehensive plan, and read the temperature of the constituency in order to bring responsible developers along with neighborhood leaders together into a dialogue and drive forward to solutions that make for a better society and a better Edina. Many more of us are watching perhaps than ever before. We may not all be in the room, we may not all be online or on TV, but many hundreds of us are reading the minutes and sharing them with our neighbors. I'm calling on each member of the City Council to consider the fact that developer-led planning is not city planning, it's a profit plan. Despite our differences, I would like to thank those on the council who have opened up to us by visiting the neighborhood and sharing a dialogue that works toward a better decision for everyone. I cannot even imagine the pressure you must all feel serving the community and the greater good of society. I welcome a chance to visit with any of you. Respectfully. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Kramer. Thanks for coming in.
That was not meant.
Yeah, folks, we try to avoid any of those types of displays here at City Council because we have people that may have contrary opinions. We're trying to respect each other's opinions and not voice or support something or even the contrary, which is worse, which is to shout somebody down. So we've been really neighborly and orderly in our conduct, and so as enthusiastic as you might have been about Mr. Kramer's comments, when we get to the point where there could be hearings involving this matter in the Parkwood Knolls or near the Parkwood Knolls neighborhood, then we will we'll have to make sure that we have this conversation again because we want people to be respectful to each other. Thank you. Yes, please.
Andy Brown, 5512 Park Place in Edina. Earlier this week, there was a report in Nextdoor by a neighborhood in East Edina saying that there was some 6 type of burglary, home invasion type car theft occurrences. I would actually like to know from the department, from the city, what actually has happened last Saturday, Sunday, and Monday for operations regarding what crime had occurred. My family owns 4 houses in East Edina. Many of you actually know some family members or worked with some of my family members, so we've invested a lot in the community. And so I would also like to push the council and the manager and the police department that if this is a growing problem, that if this is true, that they should look at supplemental resources and a supplemental plan and maybe take a session or a working session to figure out what is going to be really best for the community regarding increased crime. It's a major issue. I have a mom who's 73 who called me up and goes, what are we going to do? I have a son who's 6-year-old. I'm not impervious to leaving the community if it's going to be an ongoing problem. So just wish the council would address that and the department as well. So
I think you're going to hear something about that later. I don't know if you'll be able to stick around, but certainly you'll be able to tune in and watch virtually if you decide to go home. But I think we're going to discuss that later in the meeting. Thank you for that comment. Anyone else in the audience wish to address the council on a matter of concern to them that's not on the agenda or scheduled for a future public hearing? It doesn't seem like it's working that well.
I think I gave you the wrong one.
Wrong one? Okay,
Thank you.
all right, thank you. Okay, that's
better.
better. Okay, Janie Weston, 6136 Brookview Avenue. I have more information to give you tonight, as well as some opinions. At the last Planning Commission meeting, I commented basically the same thing that I had commented to you 2 weeks ago at the last City Council meeting on variance and other things as far as how the Drool and Moose variance happened. And in the rebuttal, there was a phrase used that really puzzled me, using performance, excuse me, performance standards as part of that statement. The variance was to the performance standards that regulated the use that was permitted. And I thought, what does that mean? So, go to City Code. Put in the search for performance standards. It took a lot of digging to find those two words right next to each other. And I finally found it in the Planned Industrial District division of the City Code under Section 36644, under special requirements. And that part of the City Code where performance standards is used is regarding design standards and controls regarding noise, vibration, dust, dirt, smoke, odor, noxious gases, glare, or wastes that are not permitted, and how you test for them. So that seemed rather odd. So while I was in PID, zoning code, and looking at it, I thought, goodness, I wonder what is allowed for principal uses. I thought, I'll take a look at that. So reading down the list of Section 36-640, I found, something that seemed odd to me. Warehousing of non-perishable products, etc., etc. Isn't chocolate perishable? Chocolate-covered caramels, aren't they perishable? I did a little research on that too. Went to the grocery store, looked at Ghirardelli, Sanders, Cadbury, Dove, and Russell Stover chocolate-covered caramels. They all have Best By dates on them. The United States Postal Service considers them food and perishable. You ship it at your own risk. Don't leave a candy bar in your car on a hot day. You know it's perishable. So, if what they are doing in their warehouse is a perishable product, how does that square here? The use of their property. So that leads to something else that I looked into, and how the city has changed in their pyramid of discretion. This one is from the League of Minnesota Cities website. This is, I looked at this morning, printed it off from this morning. And there is a difference. I don't know, can you zoom this camera out if I put more things on here? So we can do comparison. Okay. And will that show? Okay. So, one thing that struck me, comparing what the League of Minnesota Cities has on theirs, is where items are placed on here, particularly variances. This is what Edina used to use. This was produced by Roger Knutson, previous lawyer. Variance has been brought down one position, closer to open discretionary use. Now, more recently, and this came up in the Cahill District Plan, and you'll be addressing that in the future. Look where variances is now. It's getting lower, lower, lower. Why is that? Variances, the city is trying to make them a much more discretionary item. And I don't think that's a good direction for the city to be going in. Variances allow things that the zoning does not allow. And you will be going over a lot with the Cahill District Plan. Please keep this in mind. This is something that seems odd, that comparing where variances is here, what the city has now in their pyramid of discretion, it varies considerably from what the League of Minnesota Cities has on their website.
All right, do you want to make that part of the record, Ms. Weston? Because I've left you drift over your time quite a bit.
I have copies here for you. I'll
Yeah,
hand
if you want
them
to
off.
pass those out, and then I need to have you wrap up, please.
Okay. So it just concerns me that the city seems to be moving step by step by step further and further away from what the League of Minnesota Cities and state statutes seem to require. And I've been reading more code than I care to lately, but I'm concerned about this. So, thank you.
Thank you. If you want to submit all that to the clerk, then we'll all have it for comparative purposes ourselves. And as is the practice, we'll have staff comment on this at the next meeting. And if you don't have copies for yourself, we can make sure that you know, if you wanted to submit any of your other material, we could make sure you get copies mailed back to you if you wanted to. So you give the clerk.
My green on there, my printer's running out of green ink. So
Okay.
the green on there. One of the printers is looking pretty lousy.
Okay, thank you. We'll let us know if you need anything back or a copy of something.
No, you can keep those.
All right. Anybody else in the audience wish to address the council on a matter of concern to them that's not on the agenda or scheduled for a future public hearing? And let's turn to the folks that might be listening in.
I do
There's
have
your-
a caller on the line, but the caller is not yet signaling to speak. As a reminder, if you would like to make a community comment, please press *1 on your telephone keypad. That's the asterisk symbol, then the number 1. That will get you in the queue to speak. I'm still not seeing a signal, and clearly we've had more than 3 minutes, so I think it's safe for you to move on.
Okay, very good.
Oh, wait, no, guess what? Somebody wants to talk.
All right.
Operator, will you please unmute the line of our caller? And caller, please begin by stating your full name and address for the record.
Hi, everybody. My name is Daniel Eaton, 5712 Parkwood Lane. And I just wanted to more so ask a question. I have started to, I'm in the Parkwood Knolls neighborhood, in case you don't know. Very, very proud of everything my neighbor Kent just said starting off this meeting. I've been doing more research and more listening to city council and city planning meetings than I've ever thought I would have to do in my whole life. And it's bringing up some interesting questions as I listen to when it is and when it's not that the citizenry is allowed to comment. So I'm really wondering why it is that we can only comment on something that's not on the agenda or not on a future agenda. Wouldn't that normally be when people would want to be commenting on something? So again, that's really what I wanted to comment about is I think we need to make it really clear why that language is there. Because from somebody who's starting to listen to these significantly more than I've ever wanted to, it feels as though it's purposeful so that we can't speak about a pertinent topic, sketch plan, whatever it might be, when the topic is happening. And there's only a very small, limited window of time in which we can talk about a topic, which seems as though that could potentially be rife for somebody like, let's say, a developer to submit a plan over the holidays where the 60-day window runs over Thanksgiving and Christmas and New Year's. And all of a sudden, that's the only time we can give public comments. And now we really don't have a whole lot of time to comment. So I'd really like to understand why it is that we can only comment about something not on the agenda or not on a future agenda. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Eden. And we can handle that one. We can handle that one this evening. We don't have to wait for that, but I can get to that. But do we have any more callers?
No, sir.
Okay. And I guess we could address that issue now. For Mr. Eaton, anybody else in the audience that's listening in or here with us this evening, what used to happen before we had this rule in place, this practice in place of taking community comment and having someone speak on a matter that wasn't on the agenda that evening or scheduled for a future public hearing, we had situations where we were having people come in on an issue and it became a de facto public hearing without ever having been noticed up as a public hearing, because people will have their opportunity to be heard. In this council chambers, if this project comes forward, this proposed affordable housing project on Bren Road and Londonderry Road comes forward on a preliminary approval basis, I would think that this council chambers would be filled with people that will want to testify regarding their views on this matter. And when we get a lot of people here at a hearing, we'll line them up, pros and cons, and listen to all of them, and then defer for a couple weeks and make a decision. But we don't want to give somebody an unfair advantage by trying to come and talk to us about something that's going to be scheduled for a future public hearing, and try to kind of jump the starting line, if you will. And so that's the reason we have this practice in place, and there will be a time and a place for all kinds of public input, both in person, virtually, just like we're doing tonight, and in writing into the city's website. So be patient. We're going through this process. There is a process that we've worked out over the years that we think is really effective at public engagement, and we're always trying to refine it, but that's the reason that we have that particular rule in place. And I don't know if anybody else wants to supplement a comment on that, or the city manager does, but...
The only thing I would add is that over time, I came in 2010, and at that time, we did public comment at the end of the meeting, right? So one of the changes we made at that point was to move it to the front of the meeting. So it made it easier for people to participate. But we've continued to make it easier for people to participate and share their opinions with us, because we have a number of new venues for that to happen as well. And hopefully, I think one of our goals for the council and staff has been to create those venues so that they feel like they are of equal weight to you as policymakers, so that there are people that are very good at coming to a microphone and speaking in front of a group of people. There are other people that have opinions that are just as valid but aren't very good at that, right? So they have other avenues that they can use to express their opinions now, and so we are continuing to expand the number of venues that produce opinions and feedback for you, and we hope you'll treat them all equally, and just appearing in the council chambers is just one of those.
Yeah, thanks for that supplemental information. With respect to the comments made by our resident Andy Brown, I think we're going to address some of these crime issues later in the agenda.
Yeah.
I think council members have questions about that as well. And then Ms. Weston, I would assume that we'd take that up 2 weeks from now and
We will.
talk about that. I actually think that pyramid of discretion, whether it was for the league or for the city of Edina, was created by the same person.
I think it was.
So I'm kind of interested in knowing why there's a little bit of variation on theme myself.
Yeah.
And that was our former city attorney, Roger Knutson, who is now retired. So, all right. Now we're going to go to Manager Neal, who's going to address issues that came up at the prior city council meeting.
Thank you, Your Honor. At our previous council meeting on July 18th, we had a number of speakers. The first two speakers were both from Colleen Curran and Dennis Schulstead were from Rose Court, and they had some questions and concerns around the proposed designs that we're looking at for the pedestrian bridge to cross over the crosstown and into Rosslyn Park. And Mr. Milner, Engineer Milner, responded to that they're working on a number of different designs, and they will be included in those discussions as the designs begin to get fewer in number. But we absolutely want their opinion and their design opinions for that. Anna Martinez was here, didn't have a question, just expressed concern and a little disappointment, I think, that there was a division of opinion among EEC commission members and staff around the single-use bag policy. Adam Miller, you may remember, asked the council why he needed a new survey to rebuild a deck. We did have a couple of conversations with him during that following week. Did kind of, I think, reach an understanding that he did need that. It's really for us to understand where the house is on the lot, because it wasn't built per the original building permit where it was. Also, how much hardcover he's going to have on his lot, because we pay attention to that now. And so we got that issue resolved. We had a number of concerns expressed by Ms. Weston as well. And a lot of them were just her telling you what her opinion was, and she's entitled to that, of course. One concern she had, though, that I will speak to is she had some concerns about whether the city violated state code in how it conducted a public hearing around the Drulin Moose project. I will tell you that staff had a lot of consultation around that issue with the city attorney. We're pretty confident that we did not violate state law in the way that was processed. We don't have our regular city attorney here tonight. This is Mr. Brookbanks. He has been here before, but he's subbing for David Kendall. We also do not have Kerry Teague with us tonight. He's on vacation, and because he doesn't have anything on the agenda for this evening. But we can speak to that more if we need to in a future meeting.
That was with respect to the Planning Commission?
Yes.
All right, thank you. Member Risser.
I do have concerns, and I might not be on the same page as the rest of city staff, but watching the end of that Planning Commission meeting where Director Teague was going over the future, possible work plan with them, one of the items at the very end was looking at the industrial zone, and he specifically mentioned the Drooling Moose, and it sounded like taking another look to make sure everything was in line and in tune with code. And so I have concerns. And it does beg a question that I have, because there's been a couple other things, and I don't really know when we can talk about this later, but what happens if there is a council member who does not necessarily agree with staff and the legal opinion that we're getting? So we do need to talk about that. Thank you.
Anything else, Manager Neal? Anything from any other council members? Okay, good. All right, let's move on then to the next part of the agenda, which is the consent agenda. It's got several items on it this evening. In visiting with my colleagues beforehand, I understand that Councilmember Jackson would like to remove item 6O from the agenda for some further discussion. That's a potential approval of the Transportation Commission mid-year work plan. It's a modification of their annual work plan. And so with the exception of item 6O, is there a motion to approve the balance of the items on the consent agenda in a single motion?
So moved.
A second.
Motion by Member Jackson, second by Member Agnew to approve the items on the consent agenda in a single motion with the exception of item 6O. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adoption of the motion as stated, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Carried. And Member Jackson, on to 6O.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to call out and thank the Edina Transportation Commission and especially Chair Lewis for bringing this forward. We have the value of community engagement as part of our budget process, as part of our decision process, and they spoke to me at the thing for the party for our commissioners, the transition from people going on and coming off, and they said we really want to have better engagement with our community members when they come to us with concerns, and so I just wanted to applaud them. I think that's wonderful, and I'm so proud of them for bringing that forward.
Good.
So I
will move the matter?
Yes, I will.
All right.
I will move item 6O.
Councilmember Jackson moves the approval of item 6O, which is the approval of the Transportation Commission mid-year work plan modification. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Member Agnew. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adoption of the motion as stated, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Carried. And then Manager Neal, just a heads up on 6V, as in Victor. take a look at that, I think it was a development agreement. Let me look here real quick. I thought that there was we had some defined terms in there, some capitalized terms. I thought there was a place in that document where it should have been, at least in my thinking, should have been capitalized in the release itself, I think.
Look at the,
Let me look. Yeah, take a look at one of those two documents. I think there was a term that should have been capitalized within the body of the document. No.
city clerk and I can take a look at that.
Yeah,
for
take a look at that.
Format.
Okay. That's it for consent agenda, and now we're on to special recognitions and presentations, and our park department is getting an award tonight, and we have Laura Fulton, our recreation supervisor, here with us this evening, and Chelsea Swenhaugen from the Minnesota Park and Recreation Association. She's also here to present the award.
Good evening, council members and Mayor Hovland. My name is Laura Fulton, and I'm a recreation supervisor for the city. Thank you for allowing us to have some time this evening to introduce you to a program of which we are incredibly proud. In 2022, after the tumultuous years of pandemic and civil unrest, Officer Emily Jepson here and I put our heads together and decided we needed more partnership programs that built up our community. Art Together was born from these discussions, and I'm proud to say that, to this day, we have grown the program from 30 community members attending to our first event in June last year to having over 120 participants at our Art Together event in June this year. Art Together uses art as a gateway for conversation between youth and public safety professionals to promote connection and understanding in a fun and safe environment. Art has the power to transcend language barriers, and our Art Together program allows connection to our officers regardless of those barriers. By promoting this project through an art lens and hosting the project outdoors, Art Together encourages families to ask questions and begin conversations that may not have had space in more serious environments. We meet the public where they are. Recently, Art Together was awarded an Award of Excellence through the Minnesota Recreation and Parks Association. Here to celebrate with us tonight and present the award, I would like to introduce you to Chelsea Swenhaugen, representing the Minnesota Recreation and Parks Association Award Committee.
Okay, let's bring this down to my level here. Good evening. Thank you, Mayor and City Council members, for having me tonight. As Laura said, my name is Chelsea Swenhaugen, and I am a recreation coordinator with the City of Inver Grove Heights. So I am here tonight to have the honor of presenting an award from Minnesota Recreation and Park Association. I'm going to shorten that to MRPA moving forward here. This Award of Excellence is from 2022 and is being awarded to Edina Parks and Recreation for their Art Together program. Before I go into all that, I would like to tell you a little bit about MRPA. It was started in 1937 to foster the growth and development of the parks and recreation profession throughout the state. It is our state association. They also provide us with education and other resources. The MRPA Awards Committee was created in 1987 with the purpose of acknowledging individual members and agencies for their excellence in the field of recreation, parks, and leisure services. The Awards of Excellence is an annual program of MRPA that was solely created to recognize agencies and their staff for exemplary projects that either were implemented or received substantial revisions in 2022. MRPA members may nominate, as Laura has done, a project for an Award of Excellence in 7 different categories: administrative or management strategies, communications, park and facilities, programming and events, sponsorships and partnerships, sustainability and volunteer initiatives. Those are the 7 categories. Nominations are received and then reviewed, evaluated, and scored by awards committee members. These members are comprised of other professionals from around the state. Only the very top scoring nominations are selected to receive an Award of Excellence recognition. This award is presented by MRPA and sponsored by our partner, Highway Credit Union. So on behalf of the MRPA Awards Committee, it is my pleasure tonight to present an award of excellence to the Edina Parks and Recreation for the Art Together project. The MRPA Awards Committee would also like to recognize Laura Fulton, who nominated this project for an award of excellence. And from me personally, congratulations on this award, and thank you for all the work that you do for your community and how it impacts the rest of our state.
Yeah,
Thank you for having me.
Get closer to the department getting the award. City council, just, I guess, to get a picture taken.
Just a couple more.
Oh, I'm sorry. On your hand. It's so awkward.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Congratulations, and thank you for having me
Yeah,
today.
thank you. Thanks for coming
Thank
over.
you. Yes, have a great evening.
Laura, before you exit, I just wanted to tell you what a wonderful job I think you're doing on behalf of the city in the position that you're in. It seems like everywhere I go in the park system, you're there doing something that's important to get done. And your work has been really exemplary. And then the person standing next to you, of course, is an award winner here in the city as well. And it was good to see you last night on National Night out and about, and saw you at Centennial Lakes. And you've been a lot of places lately also on behalf of our community, and I think showing us off so well, both of you, showing you what Edina stands for. So thank you for that. Member Jackson?
I believe there were 90 parties we covered last night. Is that correct? Yeah, so that was awesome. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, ladies.
Thank you, Thank you, Council.
Yep.
All right, we're going to move on to the reports and recommendations portion of the agenda. And the first matter there is a resolution 2023-50. We get these every couple of weeks, and there are donations to the city that we have to accept, and we have to accept them on a supermajority basis by state statute. So is there a motion to adopt resolution 2023-50, accepting donations on behalf of the city of Edina?
So moved.
Second.
Member Jackson moves, Member Agnew seconds the adoption of resolution 2023-50. Any further questions or discussion? All those in favor of adopting the resolution say aye. Aye. Opposed? Carried. Got a wonderful donation, a couple of them really. Park and Rec, Andy Warzak, who's a longtime resident of Edina, who's done so many things for the community, now had a generous gift of 3 trees at a total cost of $2,250. 1 Swiss stone tree at Chowan Park, 1 river birch, and 1 swamp white oak at York Park. Beautiful trees going into those public facilities. And Andy, thanks for your generosity. And then Friends of the Edina Public Library, almost $900. 100 compost stew books. That made me think I should get one of those with all the composting we do at our house for the Farmers Booth Market, and that'll be coming up, I would imagine. And then Alina Health also donated some ice cream for 50 people for a social hour over at the Edina Senior Center. So we'll post all those donors' names up on the website, and thank you so much for all of that, you different individuals and organizations. And next we've got a proposal to increase the franchise fees with CenterPoint Energy and Xcel Energy. And Director Milner has this matter, and City Manager Neal may have some comments as well. Director Milner, welcome.
Thank you, Mayor. Members of Council, we're here tonight to follow up on a topic we had at the May City Council retreat, which was utility franchise fees and a proposal to change those fees potentially if we get some favorable comments here tonight. So We're allowed to do franchise fees by Minnesota statute. That's referenced here. We just wanted to call that out to say that's the law that says we can do this, and we've been doing it for about 11 years now. So the history, it started in 2012 with the Pedestrian and Cyclist Safety Fund. We call that the PACS Fund. 2016, we added the Conservation and Sustainability Fund, or the CAS Fund. In 2019, those fees changed. That was the last time that we upped those fees. And for PACS, it generates roughly $1.2 million. And for the CAS Fund, it's just under $1 million. And it's really focused on getting stuff done and the capital side of our projects within those two funds. The ETC came in front of this body in March and reported back on a 2022 work plan item that they had. And they presented a memo to the council, and their recommendation was to increase the fees to the PACS fund to double the revenue for PACS so that we can build out all the proposed pedestrian and cyclist safety improvements on the bike and ped master plan in half the time. So instead of 40 years and 20 years. So I just wanted to note that they came and made a request to increase these fees. Staff came in front of you in November of 22 and talked about our struggles with streetlight funding and literally keeping the lights on our streetlights. And we presented some options, and we landed on a recommendation of that hybrid approach where we would maintain some of our high priority areas such as Grandview and 50th and France, and we'd convert the rest to Excel through replacements and lease options. And to do that, we would need an additional up to about $600,000 per year to do that. That's about double what we have today for lease, electricity, and replacements on our street lighting system. So tonight we're throwing out a proposal to you just to have a discussion, and if it goes well, then we'd come back with an actual ordinance potentially at the next council meeting. But this was the proposal we're submitting to you to review tonight. So the years there are listed on the left-hand side of this table, with 2022 is where we are today. The first column, CPE, that stands for Centerpoint Energy. That's the fees related to their customers, and this is on a residential customer. Excel Energy is the middle column, and then the last column is the total fees when we add those together. So today, there's $5.80 of total fee on a residential customer, and we're proposing in 24, 26, and 28 roughly 22% increases over those three various years. And we would do those potential increases in individual actions by the council. So if you do think 24 fees are appropriate, and we do that at the next couple council meetings, then we'd come back again in 25 in the fall, and then again in 27. So the proposal is laid out here as 2024, we're proposing $7.10 as a total fee on the residential customers. In 2026, $8.80. And then in 2028 would be $10.80 if we move forward with this proposed plan in all those years.
And this is a proposed monthly level.
Yes, correct.
Not an annual level.
Yep, it's a monthly number. I should have put that in the table.
Looking at this, they need to understand that.
Yep, I should have had that in there. And this would apply to all property classes. We're just showing the residential, but it would apply to all the different various property classes in town. So what does that look like from a revenue standpoint? So this is the same similar table as the last one. In 2022, you can see the total revenue is about $2.2 million, and there's the split between the PACS fund, the CAS fund, and then street lighting today is zero from a utility franchise fee collection. And then there's the proposal and the revenues that would a potential option to how to split those. So in 2024, the revenue would increase about $600,000. And you'd see slight increases in PACS and CAS, and the majority of that would go to street lighting at $300,000 to start that program. And then in 2026, we could potentially increase that to $600,000, and then 28, $750,000. And then those other years, we'd also have some slight increases in the PACS and the CAS fund to address some of the options or the comments you heard from the ETC, but also what we're hearing from EEC to do more from a sustainability standpoint. So if supported tonight, if we hear positive comments, we would come back at the next council meeting with first reading of an ordinance to increase those fees, and then second reading would be a meeting after that. So I can stand for any questions, but most of the franchise fees has gone through City Manager Neal over all these years, so I don't know if there's any follow-up comments that he may have on this topic.
Thank you. Yes, Your Honor. The only thing I would add at this point is to really highlight the benefits of what we're talking about here. Increasing the franchise fees has the ability to build more sidewalks, build more infrastructure for bikes, paint a safety infrastructure in the community. And what we're proposing on the sustainability side is to increase the level of sustainability and projects, energy conservation. That's what this allows us to do as a city government. The addition of street lighting is important for a couple of reasons. First and foremost, I think, is that this has the ability to take some pressure off of our general fund, because general fund is where the street lighting is supported right now. So you do create some flexibility for how those dollars are allocated in the future, just like we talked about at our work session earlier tonight. By committing franchise fees to cover street lighting, you create the opportunity to plug those dollars that we currently spend on street lighting into other necessary city services.
Comments from council members or thoughts on the staff proposal about this increase over time on the franchise fee, or increase at all? Councilmember Pierce.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I think you did allude to this in the presentation, but if you could just repeat, if we don't do this and we stay at the current level, what's the impact?
We'll do less pedestrian and cyclist safety projects, not less. We'll stay where we are today.
Yeah.
We'll stay where we are with the CAS fund, but streetlights, we're going to have whole networks of streetlights that turn dark, and we're not going to be able to keep up on maintenance and getting them back on, because there's a lot of systems. I think the Grandview is the perfect one, where there's lights out today and we have ambient lighting that are kind of covering it, but eventually that system's going to go down. We got other systems that are right on that teetering on, turning off, and we just don't have the funding to replace them.
And so for the pedestrian projects, I think you said our current plan was to be done in 40 years.
Yep.
If we approve this, we can slash that in half and get it all done in 20 years. Or is that?
That's if we followed the ETC's recommendation, and they, I think, had much more aggressive increases in there. So I can bring that information back, but this is not, that was the ETC recommendation. We're not going as far as they.
So that is what I'm asking. So I think that's just fine if we can bring that back to really get a sense of, if we don't do this, what the impact is. And then for lighting, you talked about that what we approved was kind of this hybrid. And so same question, not doing this, does that mean from a hybrid perspective, what can we get done? What don't we get done? Are we still transitioning to Excel? That kind of thing.
Yep, just be a much slower pace on that street lighting. You know, this is going to eventually almost double the budget. We'll just have systems that are just pushed out and delayed, so we can get that burn rate a little bit better for you, defined with the ordinance next time if it's supported.
And then with the latter, I would want to understand, when in the information as you presented, from a safety perspective, what we think the impact is. On the pedestrian side, I'm sure there is kind of a safety view of that as well, but that one also has additional benefits to the community, right? But for lighting, I know we talked about some of the safety aspects of not being able to keep that lighting lit.
Turned on.
Right. So thank you. That'd be great to have that view when we come back.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Jackson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I read through your report, and I'm not understanding where the money's going to go for the environmental section of this. I know the ETC came to us and said we really want to accelerate the sidewalk program. I didn't see a breakdown of things for the CAS fund. I'd like to see that if we could. I know that there was a sense of real urgency from the Transportation Commission about getting those sidewalks accelerated, but I'd like to know the balance and how you guys got to that.
Yeah, we stick with the same percentages, how to balance the distribution. So if it's strictly a distribution, we just looked at percentages and tried to keep that the same. So council could say we want to make these equal, right? If you look at this table, they're off 400,000. That's something we could make them equal. On the side of what we're going to do with the CAS fund, we would just increase the amount of money in there and let Grace plan with the EEC and plan all the climate action initiatives. So we would just start hitting the priorities that are based on every year work plan for all departments, and we'd be able to do a few more of those every year.
Okay, thank you. And then with the street lighting, I know we're behind in repairs. Is there, if we get caught up on the repairs of the street lights over the long term, is there a click-off function where we can have just maintenance, or is it over the time where the street lights that are working now aren't working when the other ones get fixed? What's the timing of that over the long term?
Yeah, we estimated if we did get the funding, we would have 20, 25 years to do the full replacements. And like all of our other infrastructure, we don't want a big wave of infrastructure coming. So can we smooth out that curve where we can get it just to be operational, a little investment every year over time? And by converting them to Excel, that's exactly what we're going to have. They're going to have to own and maintain them. We just pay a fee every year on the majority of our lights in town.
Okay, so this will go to pay for that fee with Excel as
Yes,
well as
part of the
replacing
lease,
the
part
ones?
of replacements, exactly. Because
Okay.
they're not going to take the old lights, we got to replace them and then, or pay for them to replace them and take them over.
Okay, so there's no need to have a click-off because the costs will be ongoing.
It'll be ongoing, but maybe eventually this is more than we need, and then we'd come back to the council and say, do we want to redirect some of these franchise fees somewhere else in these other two funds or some other initiative at that time? But I think we got 20 years of trying to catch up at least.
Okay, so if there could be some sort of timetable in what we look at, I think just a tickler, so when we're all gone 20 years from now, the council will know to say, hey, we might be able to click this off.
Sure.
You meant gone from council.
Yes. Gone from council. Off to the
Or
lake.
gone. Maybe me gone.
So thank you very much.
Member Risser.
I am looking at an article back in June 28th of this year about Hopkins and their franchise fee discussion. And one of the things that they were concerned about, and I am concerned about, is how do you raise franchise fees but do it in a way so that it has less of an impact on people who have less income. And I'm thinking, if this is going to be a fee that is just applied uniformly, you have an enterprise that uses a lot of energy, say a grocery store, paying the same amount as a single-family home, true?
No.
Not true.
No, not true?
I'm just
Okay.
showing you the rates for a single-family home because that's the majority of our properties,
Yeah.
but there's at least 4 to 6 other property classes in the spreadsheet that I
Okay.
use to generate these revenues that we worked with Excel and CenterPoint on to generate. So I don't have those. off the
There's
top of my
one
head.
class of residential,
Yep.
though, but there's multiple class of commercial. There's
Large,
small commercial,
small,
large commercial.
large, and they're
Okay,
based
good
on
to know.
All
Could
higher
we-
than residential.
They are all higher than
based on the
residential.
meters and stuff.
Good to know.
Yep.
And the article about Hopkins does keep it in terms of the rate distribution for residences. And I'm wondering, is there any way, could we find out where Hopkins is now? This was an article from June. Are they finding a successful way to raise those franchise fees and do it in a way that's less regressive? And so, you've got an income earner that maybe is earning a fraction renting, and how do we sort of make it a little more, more equitable?
We've had this discussion with the street funding task force, right? Taxes typically are based on your property values. So it goes to that point where franchise fees are not. It's a flat rate no matter on your income. I know Minneapolis is thinking about using a percent of energy use to use franchise fees. So they would tie it directly to use as a sustainability measure. We've asked our city attorney just to weigh in on that. We felt like that maybe would be in 26 when we look at these again, because it's so new and we don't understand it. Can we tie it to income? I don't know the answer to that question.
We can't tie it to income.
I'm not saying tie it to
Yeah.
income, but I'm just saying, could we take a page from Hopkins and try to see if we could, have different levels of the franchise fee?
Well, we'll reach out to Hopkins and see what they got approved or
Okay.
did or did not do, and we can bring that back.
All right, thank you.
Part of what we have to work within the structure of the utility. And both of them have, as Mr. Miller noted, both of them have multiple classes of commercial, but they're both a little they're both a little different in how many classes they have and what triggers those classes. But typically, their residential classes are just one residential class.
Correct.
There's so many interesting things here. You think about community and the value community. When you think about the PAX fund and its contribution to livability, where you can walk more places and bike more places safely, and then you think about the the climate action sustainability portion of it, where we're really working on things that our people in our town have told us are really important to work on, and that is try to reduce our greenhouse gases, which also relates to the PAX fund. And then Member Pierce mentioned the relationship to safety, public safety, with the street lighting system that's state of the art, and to make sure that we take care of what we own, and we don't defer too long. And this was a conversation we had upstairs on our work session, and it's a conversation we've had over the past several years of let's make sure that whatever we build, whatever we do, we got a way of taking care of it in a timely manner, and that's what you're trying to do, is even out some of these things. Same thing, it's a variation of what we did with respect to street improvements and the street assessments, trying to level that out and make sure that it's fair and equitable over time. So I think all worthy things. Whether the amounts are right, I don't know, but I see what you're driving towards with the budget. In a single-family home in 2028, somebody be paying $125 a year, roughly, or so for helping maintain and build out our sidewalk system and all the sustainability things that we're doing around climate action, and then the streetlight system that we need to repair and replace over time. So all laudable things. I think you're hearing from this council that come back with a resolution or an ordinance, and we'll entertain it and talk about it earnestly, and then answer Member Risser's question about whether there's anything to be learned from Minneapolis, Hopkins, any other communities that are doing this and using it in a similar way.
Okay.
Is that okay, colleagues? Yeah, okay. All right. Thanks for that that presentation. And now I see where I had given you false information before. There is not a typo in 6V. It's actually in the one that's just coming up, I think. The correction I thought we should think about making, it's in this proposed ordinance around cannabis, banning the use of cannabis and hemp in public spaces. So, Manager Neal, I'm going to turn to you for item 8C.
Thank you, Your Honor. This ordinance was produced with the assistance of City Attorney David Kendall. It's comparable to an ordinance that he prepared for a couple of different cities that Campbell-Knutson represents, but notably Prior Lake. The purpose of this ordinance is to ban the consumption or use of cannabis in public places around the city. Public places has been defined in the ordinance as broadly as possible, at least in the city attorney's opinion. And so this is the kind of ordinance that you're hearing being adopted by a number of different cities across Minnesota as they figure out kind of where they want to be in terms of cannabis consumption in their communities. This is very comparable to what the city did when it went smoke-free, using tobacco as an example. I would be happy to answer any questions that you have about this tonight.
This is where I was, he's got all these defined terms at the beginning in Section 1, and I kind of rolled down into the Section 1B, and it was the prohibited activity, and then all of those prohibited activities are in lowercase, not uppercase. And maybe it doesn't matter because they're all in lowercase, and I think it's probably easy to relate back to the definitions up in Section A. But I think it's worth thinking about whether or not to capitalize those terms, since they are defined terms and capitalized all above. So just for consistency purposes, that was my only observation. Otherwise, I'm interested in my colleagues' comments about, I think years ago, when I was on the council, we banned smoking in public places or buildings that had public sort of activity in them. And we were kind of on the front end of that whole activity. And so I think there's probably an ordinance in place that would ban this, but I think it's important to maybe take a belt and suspender sort of approach and make it clear that we're not going to permit this. And I assume it would be a complaint-driven sort of ordinance, you know? Like, well, last night we were at Centennial Lakes, and one of the residents came up and he said, "I'm so glad you're thinking about doing it," because I said, "I think our council tomorrow night is going to pass this this ban on use of cannabinoid products in public places." And he said, "I can't stand the smell of that smoke." And he said, "I'm so glad you're going to do this." So just one person's opinion, but I think it reflects what we're thinking about here. So comments from council members on this? Think it's a good idea, bad idea?
Is there
Don't need
any, could we get the ordinance on the screen so people viewing at home can see what we're looking at? Is that possible?
It's going to take a minute.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Did you have a question?
Well, the only thing that I thought about, and we're not looking at specific, well, I did see a sign when I was in Minneapolis, near the falls, and it was saying no vaping as well as no smoking. And I don't know, I guess my question is, when we do the signage and we're informing the public, how specific do we need to be? You know, like no smoking any substance whatsoever, and no vaping it, you know, I don't know. So that was the only kind of concept I could bring to the table.
Right, I think that's a good question, but I think the prohibited activity, the language of that section is broad enough to cover any kind of use of that product in a public place.
Right.
So it doesn't matter if they're vaping or smoking or...
Drinking or,
Yeah.
But you're thinking about the signage, and that is something we will spend a little time on, see what our neighboring cities are doing well, so we can have comparable signage, and that's helpful to the public as well.
Member Pierce.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I might have been thinking about your question differently. I thought you were saying, Member Risser, asking the question about prohibiting, I'll call it general vaping in public spaces versus just cannabis-related vaping. Is that?
well, the sign I saw said no smoking, no vaping. So it just got me thinking, and I know there'd be some issues, you know, it could be for medicinal use, and my understanding is if there's medicinal use, that's a whole nother issue, but.
Okay, I just think it might be worth doing a follow-up to just make sure we're able to address specifically what that concern is. And then the question I had, I support this, but one of the questions I have is from a safety perspective. When you read through this, I think this means an establishment, so a business, you could utilize these products at a business, so like a cigar lounge or something like that. I think the way this is written, you could do that. That's kind of a question? No?
I can step in to sort of talk about this a little bit. So this is sort of the broadest prohibition that is allowed under the new state statute. So there's some exemptions that are required to be in there by the state statute. As far as like a cigar lounge equivalent, so the statute divides it between sort of lower potency hemp and the full strength cannabis, and there is no allowable equivalent to like a cigar lounge for cannabis. There is a limited ability to prevent, for example, the THC seltzers at a bar or restaurant. But that's sort of running up against what the state government has allowed the city to be involved in.
Got it. And so where I'm going is, it's great to have an ordinance, but from a practical standpoint, what does that mean to people? And so the examples that you were giving, I think we just, from a communication standpoint, it'd be good for us to just be clear. I'll say it this way: here's what's allowed, here's what's not. And then my follow-up question along those lines is because of my question would be, when we look at, and this is not in this ordinance, but I think it's something we should lean into, the definition of under the influence. And so what we're trying to do is, we're just saying we don't want people using these products in public places. Well, as a resident, I do want to know that there's some kind of protection, even if somebody's at home and they're doing a bunch of gummies and, right? And then they get on the road to go to Jerry's to get snacks. How can we assure the public that, yeah, right, you can do that. However, here are some other protections that we're gonna utilize to ensure that we're protecting the community at large from the influence of people using these products in a way that this ordinance actually would allow.
I'd like to have you build that factual hypothetical out a little bit more, like what are they going to buy at Jerry's?
So like a lot of other cities we're all dealing with this issue at similar timelines and similar parameters. There are a number of law enforcement aspects of this that we are still learning about and how we're going to be enforcing that, and we'll come back and make some presentations to council at some point for that. Then there are a whole class of planning and zoning kind of changes that we need to have a longer discussion with you about, and that's actually covered in the next ordinance around the moratorium issue.
Other thoughts? Okay, this is an action item. Oh, yeah.
Sorry, I just didn't speak up loud enough. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My overall question about this, and I think this goes to how it was introduced, is what is the intent? Because initially when it was presented as being similar to smoking, my reaction was, we hear from community members, it's a nuisance to smell smoke. It can impact health as well. It's more than just a nuisance. But that's where people feel it and smell it, I guess I should say. But this seems to go further than just tackling that part of smelling smoke by also prohibiting things like edibles. So that leads me to believe that it's more about like public intoxication. And so I'm just curious, like, is that actually our goal, is to say in any public space you cannot partake in this that was now just made legal by the state?
I can only tell you that's what this ordinance says. We've not had much discussion about it as a council and a staff. So in terms of the default, we've drafted something for you tonight that is as strict as it is allowed to be under state code. But this is a policy of the city that council ultimately has to decide.
Okay, thank you.
Just to add to that, this is also something where the council could decide to do not as strict as is allowed. So if we wanted to limit it to just smoking or just public parks and not everywhere in public, that's something the council could decide.
Okay. And thank you, because that influenced how I would then reflect upon it. I do think that this goes further than I would like, especially after talking to members of the community and hearing what those concerns are. A lot of it has centered around the smell. And so my inclination is to go more towards smoke products being prohibited from those public spaces. But I think, as we progress down this, we'll obviously hear more from community members as well. But that's what I've heard of as being that primary concern and would be my preference for the ordinance that we bring forward.
Member Pierce?
I don't agree with that. But I think it's a great question. And we do need to figure out what perspective how we're gonna frame this. And so there's not a right or wrong, but where I was going is public safety. When you're under the influence of these kinds of products, how can we protect? So that does go above and beyond just the smoke, the smell, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And we have had, some emails that allude to people are concerned about safety as well. So I don't know how to solve that, but we support having an ordinance for sure.
Member Jackson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I support this. I think we ban alcohol in public places and we ban smoking in public places. They're in different ordinances, but it's the same effect. I can't have a beer in the local park, and I can just see people hanging out and being high in a park and having parties, and it's the same thing as banning alcohol. So I'm in favor of doing both.
Member Risser.
Just to add to the conversation, I really do appreciate Member Jackson bringing up alcohol. One thing I do know that the number of people who have actually gone through the process to get that medical certification to use cannabis products is fairly small. And I could see people who, are sort of self-medicating without that, and then you start talking about usage, but this is kind of going down a rabbit hole a little bit, but, as I sit here and I reflect on all the things that people have said, maybe this is the former high school debater in me coming out, but I could certainly come up with arguments to support Kate, James, and Carolyn's point of view. But I think, starting out with what we have right here, right now, at the beginning of this, does sort of make a lot of sense.
Member Agnew.
Thank you. One question I do have for our lawyer is, I was maybe confused then about the conversation related to cigar establishments. And so is this similar to alcohol? Because you can go to the bar and you can get alcohol. Or is this more extreme than that, saying that you couldn't go to I know we don't have it, right, but a cannabis bar and do it there?
So this ordinance is pretty much limited to use in public, is what this one is sort of addressing. As far as use at sort of other establishments, that's maybe something else that could be looked into. Again, there's some limits on the city's regulatory power with those. Cannabis, so on-site consumption, on-sale cannabis is not something that's sort of going to be allowed. But that's, I think, sort of a separate conversation.
Thank you.
I think you made a good attempt at trying to define public place. So when you think about, we can think of the obvious: public buildings, parks, golf course, hockey, ice arena. But there's also places like Southdale Mall or the Galleria where there's enough public activity through there that you're saying you can't do that there either, which is interesting. But I like the approach, I think, and I've heard this mentioned in the conversation of, let's kind of be as protective as we can as we are all feeling our way on this. So to me, these two proposals go kind of in lockstep. We could always ratchet it back over time, but let's get ourselves in a position where we can really study it, and then if we want to back away from it a little bit over the period of time we're in a moratorium, I'm assuming we're going to get this next one passed too. We can also look at this use of cannabis in public spaces a little bit more carefully too, based on some of the experiences we're hearing about, which some members have raised. So I support doing what we're proposing to do here with this particular ordinance. Is there a motion to approve ordinance number 2023-12 concerning the use of cannabis in hemp in public and grant first reading of the same?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Member Jackson, second by Member Pierce to approve ordinance 2023-12 concerning the use of cannabis and hemp in public on a first reading basis. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
Carried. All right. It was an interesting discussion, good, thoughtful discussion. Next one is its companion, proposed ordinance 2023-13, interim ordinance prohibiting the operation of a cannabis business. And Manager Neal has this one as well.
Thank you, Your Honor. This, as I mentioned, this is the companion to what you have just acted on. This is an interim ordinance, commonly called a moratorium on operating cannabis businesses in the city. There are a number of rules and regulations that we want to be able to review, both with the community, with the Planning Commission, and with the council, regarding the planning, zoning, retail sales for new cannabis businesses in the community. We don't have that process set up yet. We don't have a timeline for that, but we want to make sure that we take the time to do this correctly, because it will have an impact on the community. So this gives us 12 months to have that in place. Typically, we have not taken the entire 12 months when we've adopted moratoriums on other issues in the past. We're happy to answer any questions, and of course, Mr. Brookbanks is able to answer questions on this as well.
Maybe we'll go to Mr. Brookbank first and ask, your office also crafted this proposed moratorium. Is that consistent with what some of the other cities are doing that your firm represents?
That's correct, Mr. Mayor. This is sort of a broad move that a lot of cities are looking into.
Questions for Mr. Brookbank or Manager Neal? Member Pierce, and then Member Agnew.
So I won't repeat everything I said the last time, but my point is that and maybe we're doing this and I just don't see it. I think we're in a better position as a city if we have an umbrella across all of this, and we're able to say things like, our focus is for public safety. Our focus is to be able to allow medicinal uses, or some type of strategic view of what we're trying to go after, and therefore we're going to look at ordinances that support and help us achieve those things for the city. Because that then gives you this much broader view that can talk about, well, here's how we're going to address being under the influence of these types of things. You can't use these products in public spaces. We are not going to support businesses that sell these products at a certain intensity level or what have you. But the way this reads, and I get it's in the ordinance, but like Section 3A, to just say we're doing an ordinance and the intent is to study, I get that. But really what we're trying to do is where you were going, Manager Neal. We're trying to understand this in the broader context so that we can put policies, procedures in place that protect the public, what have you. And so I would just like to see that be the lens that we look through, however we define it, as we start to look at policies and ordinances moving forward. If that makes sense.
Totally makes sense. Moratorium ordinances have particular turns of phrase and things like, and that's what you see in this particular ordinance. When it talks about in-depth study, that's really something that staff and community and Planning Commission and council members will be involved in.
Member Agnew.
Thank you. I really like how this one includes specific timelines. So saying through the end of 2024, which I know there are specific reasons why that's in there, but I also think it helps when one of the intents, and I do agree with Member Pierce on building that out a bit more and having more of that strategic lens, but when one of the intents is to study and come up with our better strategy as a city, it helps hold us accountable when we have that timeline in there. And so I like knowing that regardless of what comes out of that study, we will be addressing this one for sure again. We'll be talking about it, whereas with the previous one, there wasn't that date attachment, which doesn't mean we couldn't revisit it, but I think that this just holds us more accountable as well. So overall, I do like the way this is written. The one question I had is, if we do a study and we're super quick, like things are in local government, could we change this sooner?
Yes, if the city felt that it had done the study it needed to do, this could be revoked sooner than the current end date.
I think when we adopted a previous moratorium on the hemp products, it was in place for 2 months.
Yeah, 2-3 months at the most, I think.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Member Jackson?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just really briefly, let's make sure the definitions in both of these are the same. So both the capitalization and then cannabis product and certain cannabis products, I think, are the two different terms. So if we could have the same definitions, I'd appreciate that. So, thank you.
Member Risser, any comment?
I'm good.
Okay. You know, what I see here is because of the challenges around the sale of cannabis products at the local level, and as it says in paragraph section 1C, are subject to local planning and zoning restrictions and must comply with the local zoning code, but the new law provides no guidance on how cities are to zone for the new businesses, leaving it to local control. To me, this is almost like it's like a civil moratorium. You know, we're on the criminal side. We're trying to figure out. If you listen to I was with the chief last night. I'm sure those of you that were traveling with a police officer were talking about marijuana and driving under the influence and how they were. You know, that's a work in progress on the criminal side too. So here we are working on the civil side, trying to figure out what we can do from a local zoning control standpoint. And it might take a little bit of time. But I think it's important to be able to figure out how to do that, especially in the context of the state requirements around how many of these facilities we need to have in a particular town based on population, as I understand it.
Right.
And, you know, how extensive can our regulation be? So I supported it as well. Manager Neal.
The only final question or request I have for you is that there is, unlike any other moratorium ordinance, there is a public hearing that's built into this, statutory public hearing that's built into this moratorium ordinance. And we would like, if the council is willing to have that public hearing on August 15th and to close and hopefully take action that evening. If not, the next time you could take action would be the first council meeting in September.
Okay. Let me propose that in the form of the motion and see where we get. So does any member of the council wish to move to approve ordinance 2023-13, an interim ordinance prohibiting the operation of a cannabis business, and grant that ordinance first reading and designate a public hearing to be held on this matter at our regular scheduled meeting on August 15, 2023? So motion to that effect? So moved. Member Pierce?
Second.
Member Jackson seconds. The motion is stated. Anybody need me to restate it? I hope not. All those in favor of adoption of the motion as stated say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. The only thing I was wondering here was if we have the public hearing on August 15th, is there a proposal by staff to do what we've been doing periodically, and that is defer the decision again for another 2 weeks, or would you be thinking about a second reading and a decision that particular night?
That's what we're asking for this.
Okay. Is that something everybody's comfortable with?
Is it possible to open up Better Together in the meantime?
Yeah. Is it open now, Jim? It might be. If it's not open now, it's supposed to be open very quickly. We'd like to have.
It is City Manager Neal.
Is it? Okay.
Okay, terrific. Thank you.
Okay. All right, now, Manager Neal, you've got the next item. You're on a little roll here on local elections management now. We've got one of our important school board members with us this evening, dressed in as Edina Green. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Your Honor.
It looks like a fresh haircut, too. Didn't want to get too personal, but...
Yesterday, yes,
Thank you, Your Honor. This action really is a statement from the City Council affirming the discussion that we had at the July 18th work session, and really just lays out the kind of the policy parameters and direction that you want your team that's visiting with school staff to follow as we put together the agreement handling elections for the Edina School District. So that's what it is. It's not. It's a motion, I believe. It's not a resolution or an ordinance, but provides just the overall direction for us as your team that's putting this together.
All right. In fact, your language on the motions, it says, affirm the City Council's July 18, 2023 consensus on a proposed agreement with the Independent School District 273 for local elections and management. So
That's right.
It gives you a little latitude in what we finally approve, and I think we'll want to make sure we're on the same page with the school board on this too. So thanks for coming this evening. I don't know if you have any comment. If you do, you want to come up here. All right. Okay. All right. Is there a motion to affirm the City Council's July 18, 2023 consensus on a proposed agreement with the Independent School District 273 for local elections management?
So moved.
Member Jackson moves.
Second.
Member Pierce seconds. The motion is stated. Any further conversation, discussion? All those in favor of adoption of the motion as stated, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Carried. And then we have one final matter in the action phase of the agenda this evening. And Manager Neal has this matter, and Addison Lewis, our Community Development Coordinator, is here as well to answer any questions.
Yeah, this one I think is easier. We are asking council action. We had asked you to take action to submit the Cahill plan to the Met Council on this date. We're asking you now to table that to August 15th to allow us to have some additional time to take a look at some zoning definition concerns that Councilmember Risser has, and also some stormwater management planning concerns that Councilmember Jackson has. We think we can address those items in a couple of weeks and bring it back to you for action then.
All right. Questions for Manager Neal? Comments? All right. The request is that we continue the matter that we just discussed involving Resolution 2023-46 to the August 15, 2023 regular meeting of the City Council. Is there a motion to that effect?
So moved.
Member Agnew moves. Member Risser seconds.
No, can I
Second. I'll second, and then you can discuss.
Okay. All right. Member Jackson seconds, and now we're open for discussion. Member Risser.
It's not so much a zoning definition that I'm concerned with, but every single one of the proposed Cahill plans, A through D, involves a comprehensive plan amendment to change 5 parcels that are adjacent to Ohms Avenue from industrial to office residential. And I do have concerns about that, and I did go through the plan. I'm not seeing very much information about what might happen if that were to take place, and I am concerned because so much of the narrative is about preserving the industrial zone, and it really is that one avenue where you can access those. And so just looking at it, and really wish there was a version where those 5 parcels did remain industrial. So it's not just a definition, but it's a concern about the comprehensive plan amendments that are being proposed. So I just want to clarify that. Thank you.
You've raised, again, an interesting question I think you raised in our prior meeting, and that is there's only one street into that cul-de-sac that butts into 70th, really, the hill below 70th. And so as we go about thinking about this decision as to whether to rezone, it would be nice to know if there were housing there, what kind of traffic it would generate, and could we handle the capacity of that? So if somebody wants to put up, there's 5 parcels, if there's ends up being 200-300 units on those 5 parcels total, what's the impact?
Right, and based on the calculations that I did, it could be a lot more than that, just given the way that we have been rezoning and going to the max of 100 units per acre. You could be looking at over 1,000 residential units, although the land is kind of questionable for building, but it could be far more than a few hundred, but even a few hundred, and you can't get a road through that substation.
Yeah,
either.
no, you can't.
So
That's it.
anyway.
I agree. Mr. Lewis, you want to come up for a moment and tell us what the task force did and the Planning Commission did around this issue? It must have been the one that they talked about with that single access point into that cul-de-sac.
Yeah, addressing the traffic concerns.
Correct.
Specifically. I think, we met with Director Milner's team and kind of discussed traffic in different densities, and I think at the densities that are proposed in the plan, traffic wasn't a concern on those roadways specifically. The comprehensive plan does identify 2 other corridors through the Cahill district that are anticipated to approach capacity by 2040, but it's not Ohms.
Well, Ohms just isn't that little segment. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you thought about Ohms overall, maybe you can handle that. But the segment in the cul-de-sac is what I think Member Risser's worried about, and I've given it some thought too. When I was back in there with one of the owners of one of those pieces of property, I think I mentioned that in one of our prior meetings, who years ago said this would be a great spot for housing, in his building. Mm-hmm. To take my building out, and then he ended up selling that building, and that was kind of the pinnacle of our mixed use. We had baseball, pitching, and a crematorium. It was quite a combination. We don't have either one anymore. I don't think. We had a basketball court and something else. Anyway, I do think it's worth having a little bit more definitive information on it. I don't know, Director Milner, if you can provide any more insight, or within 2 weeks, can we get information that help us make a good decision on that?
Yeah, let us bring back some more information.
Okay.
They studied it, the consultants
That'd
had
be
some
good.
information, and we can do that.
That'd be good. It's a charming little spot back in there when you make that turn. I don't know what that street is that abuts into Ohms Lane when you come around the corner of Creekside condominiums, You turn off Metro Boulevard and there's a little stub street, and then you get to Ohms, you can go left or right. You go right, you go into the cul-de-sac. And it's a real pleasant place. It feels like it would be good for housing. It's right there by the trail, but how much housing could it take, I guess is the question. A, is it the right place for housing? That's your first threshold question. And B, if it is, how much could it take?
And when you talk to people about, back in the day, we had General Motors here in Edina, and, thinking about really neat places that, are in industrial zones. And yes, it's nice to have a walking place by residential, but it's also nice if you have a walking place for people who are working in the industrial zone, so they can take a break and they can stretch their legs and, that kind of thing. It is very valued, and it could be valued as industrial property in that regard.
Okay. All right, thanks. Anybody have any questions for Mr. Lewis at this point? All right, thanks for sticking around.
You bet.
It was good to have you here. Is there a motion to continue this matter? We have a motion and a second, I guess, to continue the matter to August 15, 2023. Any more discussion? All those in favor of adoption of the motion as stated, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Carried. All right, Commission correspondence. I doubt we've had any other correspondence come in this evening. No. Our clerk is saying no as she stretches a little bit. And now we're on to manager comments.
Thank you, Your Honor. We have had some questions from council members about the concerns that you've heard about burglaries, home burglaries this past weekend. And so I did ask Deputy Chief Aaron White, who's here with us tonight, if he could speak to that issue. There's, of course, some limitations about crimes that are under investigation and how much we can say about that, but I think I'll let him make that choice about how much we can share.
Thank you. As was brought up earlier this evening, there was a number of, I think it was 6 was the correct number was given. Burglars reported over the tail end of this weekend in kind of the northeast part of the city. I think it was an area east of France between about 54th and 60th Street. That said, of course we never like to see that, and if it affects you directly, or you are in that neighborhood, it obviously hits close to home, and so we're certainly cognizant of that. The positive news is we're actually seeing an improvement in these trends overall. we're actually seeing this year compared to last year a decline in burglaries of 21% year to date. And so, like I said, I mean, I don't want to in any way understate the seriousness of it when it hits that close to home, or when we see activity typically carried out by the same actors where, you know, they have some success with 6 of them in one night. That's alarming, obviously, but you know, that's what indications are, is that we probably had a group of individuals that were responsible for all of that. But there isn't a whole lot we can say other than we have had some promising leads on identifying suspects and that sort of thing. So they're doing excellent work on that front. And obviously, we're always looking at trends and what's going on to try to reduce that. Theft from auto is another common crime related to this spree. Cars and driveways that might be unlocked or unsecured lead to, in some cases, these types of burglaries, where they enter a car and maybe find some valuables, but also may find a garage door opener. Press that garage door button, and it becomes, you know, an extended crime of opportunity leading to those burglaries. And likewise, as we've talked quite a bit here, if the key or the electronic key fob is in that car, it's also what leads to the auto theft. Good news is that crime is also down this year. Theft from auto is down 14.6%, same time period this year to last. And catalytic converter theft, something we talked about a lot in the past, also way down by about 54%. However, we saw a trend upward over the last couple of years in auto theft, and that continues. We're up 16.6% in auto thefts. And again, you can see I'm kind of weaving a lot of that together. You know, whenever somebody turns on a microphone for me on this subject, or Member Agnew and I got to spend some time last night visiting parties for the block parties, the night parties. I'm always going to say this, which is we have to lock these cars. We just have to. The cars in the driveways unlocked are leading to more than any valuables that might be in the car. And that includes garage door openers, which are in turn leading to burglaries or entries to houses. And in a surprising number of cases, especially with modern technology, they're to auto thefts. It's a natural part of what we see now to when we're going into these cars to put a foot on that brake pedal and hit that start button just to see if that thing is there. And if it is, that car is going to be stolen. Much like I don't want to diminish the significance of burglaries, I don't want to blame any victims here when it comes to auto theft. We don't want to do that. Sometimes it's an accident. You know, you don't realize it's in there. But that is driving this trend. We do not, with the exception of some of the high-profile Kia and Hyundai thefts that have been occurring and well-publicized what's happening there, the vast majority, almost all of these other auto thefts involve unsecured cars with keys or the electronic fobs inside of them. So that's kind of the summary. Do you have any other questions about that?
Councilmember, questions, comments? Yeah, thanks for all of that. I know in so many areas we're improving, crime is down, but that auto theft, primarily by juveniles, is up, and it's up everywhere. The chief and Manager Neal and I will be at a meeting in the middle of the month up in Golden Valley. We're co-hosting because auto theft was also up in Brooklyn Park and in Golden Valley and in St. Louis Park and even out second ring suburb like Minnetonka. And so we've got to figure out some strategies here with all of our suburban communities and our core communities on how to deal with these kids that are involved in this activity and try to get it stopped. Having said that, I will kind of reinforce what you said. And then when I was with the chief last night at the block parties, he was telling everybody, I'm here for crime prevention. And the same thing you just said. You know, we can't live like we were when we were younger and you leave your key in your car, and just don't do it. I mean, if you drive your car into the garage and close the garage, don't leave the key in the car. You know, because it takes 30 seconds once they get in a service door or something else to push that button. If the car starts, boom, they're gone, and your car's gone. So we just have to be more careful and cautious about what what we do. So, in terms of crime prevention. So thanks for that.
Absolutely.
And we talked to people about it in the past, and I think people were improving, but we're a trusting group, and we just need to be a little bit more cautious. All right. Any other manager comments?
Only to say I did National Night Out with our teams last night, and it was a wonderful evening, and we're really proud to be a part of that group of people. The addition, I think, of our Public Works staff to the police and fire was really a fun addition, and at least our guy got a lot of attention. He had a street sweeper with him, and he was answering almost as many questions as the guy with the squad car. So great event, carried off great, and proud to be part of it.
Good.
That's all I got.
All right. Member Risser.
Well, I also participated in Night Out. I did go to a condo association near the Cahill district, so that was how I started. And then I went to my own block party, and I can attest it was great to have Public Works stop by, and the kids love those plastic work helmets. I do want to emphasize some of the messaging that I was promoting, the lock around the clock, which plays into what we've been talking about, and really do lock up, and then the tell time, TIME, to avoid being a victim of crime. And I really want to, hats off to the police department and their communications team for putting these things together that do really sink into your head. But T, take your keys with you. I, in your car, don't leave valuables visible. M, make sure you lock all windows and doors. E, even when you're home, close garage doors. And the one time someone broke into my husband's car that was in the garage and took his work bag, it was when he came home and he thought he closed the garage door, but the car was a little bit too close to the exterior and he didn't. And it was an opportunity that we inadvertently created. So it does happen. Just slow down, take a moment to make sure that you have locked your car and all of that. The other thing I want to give a shout out to is there's the Safe Cam program. And I printed this off online. We have 225 cameras that have been registered by residents and businesses. We've done that, our family. And it really is such a logical thing to participate in. Just makes it possible to be a partner with the police department and really make sure that those surveillance systems are being used to their fullest. And, we're a neighborhood, we're a community, Edina. Let's all work together and come together and really try to get that going. And I don't know if Officer White would want to add to that or anything, if I covered that Safe Cam program accurately or not.
I thought you did a very nice job. I would just add that it's on our website, on the city website, under police. And I also want to just add, because the question does come up every once in a while, the Safe Cam program allows folks to let us know they have a camera. It does not give us access to cameras. It does not give us access to video, that sort of thing. That's totally up to a resident's discretion. It just lets our investigators know if something's taken place that there may be useful camera footage, and they would contact that person. So we're not looking at that footage unless we request it.
Member Jackson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've got three things. First of all, one of the conversations that I had last night was about the reduced speed limits. And I wonder if we have a policy or whether we should adopt a policy to kind of review things, new programs as they come forward, whether it's the speed program, the sustainable building policy. I was looking at that this afternoon. Have we gone back and looked at that? The tree ordinance, I believe we're going to be looking at. But just so I see Mr. Milner's leaning forward. Are we going to hear about whether reducing the speed limit has been effective or not?
Yeah, when we asked council to approve that matter, we said we would collect data after a year of implementation and come back and present those results. So we're looking at, I think 2024, you'll be seeing the results of that change in speed limits and see what the behaviors, if any, or if they have changed, we'll present the results.
Excellent, thank you. The second thing is I serve as the co-chair of the city's Climate Caucus, which is a group of elected officials across the state who are concerned about climate change, and we share best practices, do some lobbying, and just basically share ideas, which is a wonderful thing. Today we had a planning meeting where we talked about trying to investigate impactful actions that cities can take and just really make sure that we put our focus where we have the impact and try and see what some of the best research is on that. And I will report back. I'm really looking forward to that meeting. But we've got a number of other items coming up. I just wanted to let you know I'm working on that. And finally, National Night Out. We talk about the job that police can do, but these neighborhood meetings are so wonderful to get to know your neighbors, build that community, and then also you have a sense of the network and that safety net from knowing one another. So I want to thank absolutely everybody who planned a party last night or who throws a block party on another weekend night or another night, because it's one of the things that makes our city safe and just a wonderful place to live. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. That was a great shout out for those folks. Councilmember Pierce.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So echo the neighborhood night out. That was great. Always enjoy that. So I won't belabor that. Very cool. Looking forward to it next year. Two other things. This week, member Risser and I met with Nick and Andrew, Nick Bauer, Andrew Scipione, and Chad Milner to talk about some of the traffic issues that have been raised across the community. It was a great conversation. We really focused on trying to understand the process we use, the data that we use, the standards that we try to apply. And so we spent, I think it was an hour, maybe a little bit longer than that, to go through a lot of that information. And so looking forward to them coming in the council, maybe the next meeting, and sharing some of that content for the public to hear. So I thought that was really good. And then the second thing, I've been doing some work with Stephanie Hawkinson on trying to kind of push on how we can fund affordable housing to just kind of accelerate towards our goals a little bit. I think we've had 4 or 5 kind of working sessions, and looking forward to being able to share some of that information more broadly. And I believe she should have scheduled a separate meeting with each of the council members to share a little bit about that, and then to get a little bit more information around your individual objectives in that space. But hopefully we'll be able to bring some of that information back in near term. And that's it.
Good, thank you. Member Agnew.
Thank you so much. So just want to echo some of the fun that I had at the Night to Unite, specifically because I was down near Braemar, and so many people were so excited about, very specifically, like the mountain biking trails. So it's really cool to then, one, have some work that we're doing that we approved tonight being related to Braemar and kind of an evolution there. But just to know that people are engaged and excited about the work that's coming forward. And then the other thing that was discussed a lot was traffic safety, right? Like everyone else said, and specifically as it pertains to pedestrian safety. And so given that public safety was such a big topic of just tonight in general, I also wanted to call attention to, because I think applications are still open for Edina's Citizens Academy. So for those who are really interested in this topic and want to know more about how it works here in Edina, I just want to do a shout out to apply for that, be involved in that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Two of you have caused me to think about things. One I forgot to raise in our budget session that we just had, and Member Agnew caused me to think of that. The budget implications we didn't talk about of those local option sales tax projects that we're going to be having. I mean, we're working on 24 or 25 budget. Some of those things are going to happen in that period of time, and what are the implications of, borrowing against that stream of revenue to get the things done that we want to do, we should know that in the budgetary process.
Yeah.
So that we have that information. And I didn't see any of that in what we looked at today. And then, Member Jackson, in her work, her climate-related work, caused me to recall, and I don't think I've told you guys this, but I've been asked to be the chair of the Standing Committee on Transportation for the U.S. Conference of Mayors. So when the president called, it was the mayor of Reno for this upcoming year, and I said, well, it's always been a big city mayor. The Denver mayor is the chair now. I'm the vice chair. She said, no, you know what you're doing. I'm going to ask you be the chair. Okay, I said, I'll be the chair. So that'll be a big job, and I'm thinking that for our staff, Chad, you know, for cities and their interaction with their state DOTs and the federal government, how are we going to get the most we can out of IIJA? I think input from cities is going to be really critical on that. So if you wanted to gather, and I guess we could gather up people that are on the technical advisory committee for the TAB, but city engineers to meet to talk about some of the opportunities and challenges around IIJA for cities, and if we're not taking advantage of those, or there's some impediment to being able to take advantage of it, I should know that, because we'll have a direct pipeline now into the US DOT. And then same with DBE. You know, I've told them before at US DOT, I don't think we're doing a good job on disadvantaged business enterprises, getting, you know, having them maximize their potential in terms of being able to get up and get started in business and in life. Like in Minnesota, it's a good faith sort of effort when these big federal projects come in. And the Met Council has done a great job, incidentally, on Southwest LRT. Their goals were, I'm going to say, like 15 to 17% minority business enterprise work, and they're up at over 21%, I think. So overall, so there's some really key things that we need to hone in on that require your expertise to be able to gather up the information we need. I'll try to meet with MnDOT as well, and then Met Council to get their input on transit-related issues. And so just a heads up on that. If you can start thinking about that, sooner the better, too. And then I thought of one other thing Lieutenant White caused me to think about that we talked about last night, technology, the license plate readers that we've got. I think we've got 4 now, license plate readers. Or do we order 4, or we're going to try to get 4
Yeah,
more?
it's a little complicated. We have, we're going to have 5 of the stationary ones, which is, I think what you're probably referring to, that's the part of that flock agreement.
Yep.
We also have a number
With the
of
federal funds, I think we bought.
Mobile ones that have been in service for some time.
And then Southdale's going to put, you know, some of the major commercial areas are going to do their own.
Yeah, in fact, Southdale Center has already added, I believe, 8 cameras to all their incoming traffic.
And you might want to talk a little bit about how they work and how it's a really, I think, a great crime prevention tool.
Sure, yeah, it's advancing technology with, you know, as cameras get better and whatnot, to be able to pull a license plate out of a video image and then compare that to a database that the Minnesota BCA would maintain of, they call hot files type database of stolen vehicles, stolen license plates, kind of wanted felon type of situations, and to relay that information to us.
Yeah, so the reader would relay immediately to dispatch stolen car, stolen license plates, and then they can do some intercepting pattern on.
That's right. Yeah.
On that. Yeah. Okay. Good. Yeah. Thanks for that. And then I was thinking about this incident where there had 6 burglaries in one night. I was thinking a couple of years back, and our police have been really good at solving these issues. We had a career criminal who had just gotten out of prison, I remember, was doing burglaries out in Parkwood Knolls a few years ago. And we caught him. It took a little bit of time, but we caught that person. And then there was a young guy who was, I think his parents might have lived over in Morningside neighborhood. He came back from the West Coast. He was, as I recall, a semi-pro hockey player. And he was really quite athletic and agile. And he'd you know, summertime, he'd go in through people's windows that were open. And same thing I think has happened in some of those houses, and steal things. And we caught him too. So I'm optimistic that we'll be able to deal with these folks that are involved in this group as well. We've got good police working all the time. And so we told people last night too, when you see the Edina police out and about, tell them thanks. It's a tough job, even in Edina. It's a stressful job for people, and trying to make good judgments and good decisions all the time. And so tell them thanks when you see them. It's really important. And that's, let's see. Oh, I had one other thing. I had a conversation with the mayor of Burnsville, and she said that they hired a third-party provider to install, I think she said 57 electric chargers around town. And so I was wondering if we'd looked at that at all, and I suppose then the arrangement is they install them, they collect the revenue off the charging, but they're moving on it, And I think we should be.
Plymouth did the same thing, so we've looked at those various programs and didn't feel it fit at this point in time with our infrastructure and where we want chargers.
You're working on that?
Yep.
Okay, good to hear. That was it for me. That caused anybody else to think of anything they wanted to talk about?
Okay. Mr. Mayor, did you want to talk about Michael Braun?
About?
Michael Braun.
Oh, thank you for that. Yeah, I do. Yeah. So, folks, thank you, Manager Neal. We had really a tragic thing happen here. We had a person who was a longtime freelance photographer for the city of Edina pass away on August 1st. He was unloading equipment to take portraits for local Rotarians last Thursday, and he got stung by a bee. And he didn't have an EpiPen with him, but he had an intense allergic reaction, and it led to cardiac arrest. And our folks were there right away, within just a few minutes, and tried to assist him. And he got great care, as I say, from our local paramedics. And then he went to the University of Minnesota Hospital, and the damage was so severe from that single bite that he was not able to survive, and he was in intensive care for several days, and then passed away yesterday. So Michael Braun, a wonderful guy, and I think he's taken our photos before on several occasions. And his wife Connie, he's got 3 kids. He's just a middle-aged guy who had this horrible thing that happened to him, and so he's been a lifelong resident of our community and a photographer for the city on a freelance basis for a long, long time, and just a wonderful, wonderful human being. And it really is a tragic story. So be grateful for every day that we have, I guess, is one of the lessons you get out of that. Stung by a bee, and you're passing away within a few days thereafter. Not good. So our condolences to his family, to his wife Connie, and her 3 kids. We're thinking about you. And your town cares about you. So our hearts and best thoughts are with all of you. And I think that's it, and thanks for that reminder. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
A second.
We had a motion second to adjourn the meeting of the Edina City Council this Wednesday, August 2nd, 2023. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adjournment say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. We stand adjourned.